ty si musíš pripojniť, že môžeš sa teraz kdekoľvek v podstate postaviť. Hej. Ja som taká, že... Ja niekedy už ani neviem, že vlastne, čo sa pýta.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Vazil Hudák. You have to wait a bit. Okay?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for a short delay, but you know how it is. Too many panels, too many discussions and things happening. This is typical GlobSec, so thank you for joining us for this session. I do believe that we will have an interesting discussion. And I would like to start by introducing our panelists. First, Debora Revoltella, who is the Chief Economist of the European Investment Bank. Debora, please join us here. Another powerful lady, Beata Javorcik, Chief Economist from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Beata, welcome.
Yeah.
It's also very nice to see these two institutions who from time to time compete with each other. Sit next to each other, but these are two very friendly chief economists, so that's excellent. And then we have Professor Švejnar, founder of CERGE-EI, and Richard N. Gardner, professor of the School of International and Public Affairs from Columbia University. Welcome, Jan. Thank you for joining us from New York, and you are all over the world, so very, very welcoming. And then a very good friend from Poland, Maciej Witucki, president of the Polish Confederation Lewiatan. Maciej, dzień dobry, witamy. Excellent. So here we are. As you see, we have very nice combination of economists who look at things from, I would say, academic/research side, but also somebody who is looking from the European economy from academic but global perspective with Professor Švejnar, and then of course very practical guy who is dealing with local SMEs and companies from Poland, but not only, and who can feel the pulse of what is happening on the ground. So I think excellent combination. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. And to go immediately into the topic, I would like to start with a kind of tour de table about how you see, from your point of view, how you see the European economy today. How would you identify key challenges that we are facing so that we identify what are the topics that we should really focus upon? But Debora, if you could maybe go ahead first.
I think on my side, I am much more relaxed in terms of the policy priority definition today, in a moment in which it's very clear and there is a very strong agreement on what are the policy priority at the European level and also at the global level. The reason why I'm more confident is that we come basically in the last 3 years, inflation was the only thing that people were talking about. It was all about monetary policy and how to tighten quickly in order to avoid the inflation expectation to become entrenched. And so that was really guiding most of the policy discussion. In this moment, I think we are much more confident, and I think it was very interesting, the discussion also in the Jackson Hall just a couple of weeks ago, that the situation is turning, inflation expectations are more anchored, and now finally the discussion is all on the structural point of view. And I think being on the structural point of view, we really see where the transformation has to come from. Another point, I think that in Europe we are all expecting the new commission coming up, and I think von der Leyen has been clear on the point that this will be a investment-focused commission, so a commission that will strongly work on competitiveness of the European economy and on delivering on investment. And that's quite important. I think for institutions like us is key from EIB, EBRD point of view, the fact that we need investment, we need to transform the economy. And then in the transformation of the economy, looking at the competitiveness, it will become even more important looking at the single market and what we see the functioning and non-functioning of the single market. I was in the Next Door panel, and Recoleta was talking about his report, but I think it's really spot on that in Europe we have to look at energy, ICT, and financial sector, and these three markets needs to become more integrated. And I just repeat what he was saying. I really liked the message that the enthusiasm of Central Eastern Europe for transformation should really come forward, because in old Europe, people are more conservative. National interest is sometimes blocking the more integration, and I think it's something quite interesting if this moves forward. So if I have to say my take on the economic situation, challenges there are huge, because the structural challenges for Europe are huge. But I think the positive point is that there starts to be some alignment of agreement on what are priorities, and the structural part of the economy becomes really the center for the next policy discussion. But the times are going to be challenging, I think. So it's true we have this soft landing of the economy, but there will be a lot to do. Fiscal room is not much. Actually, will become much stricter. The rule of public sector in supporting investment is going to be much more constrained. So there will be need to find more innovative ways to attract the private sector into supporting some part of investments. But it will be very, very important to have the alignment of the right planning of project, the right integration of market, the right regulation, and then the financial instruments that can allow also private investment to take place.
Thank you, Debora. Yeah, so Inflation more or less under control, moving towards structural reforms, which are, I would say, as former Minister of Economy and working in the Ministry of Finance, more painful and difficult to do. But Beata, how do you see the situation, and how would you pinpoint the key pain points for the European economy? Yes.
Well, I think in the short run, we are still going to feel the fallout from the war in Ukraine. So yes, energy prices have gone down, but prices of natural gas in Europe remain 4 to 5 times as high as in the United States. And this ratio is expected to increase during the heating season. So that's going to erode European competitiveness. And this year is going to be a challenging year for Germany, which means that Central Europe is going to see lower demand for exports. Second, inflation has gone down. Actually, if you look at countries where the EBRD operates, by historical standards, the disinflation process has been very fast. But policy rates still remain, in many cases, quite elevated, and that's putting brakes on the economy. And also, Central European countries saw an increase in the risk premium they are paying over German bonds as the war started. And this premium is still there. It hasn't gone away. So costs of borrowing are higher. What we see both in Western and Central Europe is increase in bankruptcies. So these bankruptcies went down after COVID, thanks to government support. Many of those support programs have been withdrawn, so we see bankruptcies picking up. Now, what's on the horizon? I worry about Donald Trump getting into the White House and imposing a 10% tariff on imports from Europe. According to some estimates, that would shave off 1% from EU's GDP. And then I worry about escalation of tensions with China, which would limit access of European exports to the Chinese market.
Great, thank you very much. Well, these are real worries. We'll see how situation develops in US, and I think it leads very nicely to Professor Švejnar, as you look at this part of Europe from kind of US perspective or global perspective. Yeah. How do you see that, and also this relationship to the US economy and political developments? Maybe a few thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I fully agree with Beata and Debora that what's needed, I think what Europe probably can be characterized as a continent, and European Union in particular, as a sector or part of Europe that has incredible potential and just hasn't been able to realize it fully. And so I think what's going to be crucial is whether these steps that have been outlined, whether they really will be undertaken and Europe will move ahead. Just to look at it historically, in 2000, the Europeans said that in 10 years, Europe will be the technologically most advanced region in the world. By 2010, we realized that was not the case. So 2020 was set as the goal. Well, we are at 2024, and we're obviously not there, right? And so when you look back, around 1990, the world has realized that Europe has more or less caught up with the United States after World War II. And the debate was at the time, if you recall, about which sectors and where Europe was going to overtake the United States. Instead of that, what we've seen in the last 35 years, the US taking off and Europe and Japan, lagging behind, right? So this is very serious, that in fact Europe has relatively fallen behind. A large part of it was that in the 1990s, European firms missed the boat on digital technology, right? We go back again to 1990, out of the top 20 firms, quite a few were European. Now, how many are there? None. Well, there is one. There is LVMH, but that's not a technological firm. That's a luxury producer. So that's just these few statistics give you the sense of where Europe is and why it's lagging behind. And the factors were exactly those that Debora and Beata have identified. And the US has ventured to go, whether you like it or not, into certain areas, like fracking. Right? The US was a net importer of energy. It's now exporter. right? So Europe decided not to go that way, which is fine, but we should realize the opportunity cost when it comes then to the price of gas in the two countries, and capital moves. So there are quite a lot of European firms with now especially encouraged with the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, which in fact provides considerable stimulus, tax stimulus and incentives of that kind to firms from all over the world that start producing or continue producing, expand production in the United States. So the US is an extremely dynamic economy. It's doing well. It's growing this year between 2 and 3%, while Europe is closer to 0, right? And some countries like Germany, Czech Republic, not doing well at all. So you have very different dynamics, both in the long run and in the short run. So as I would say, the challenge is there. It's been there for a long time. It's understood. And it's really a practical question of practical steps. And the challenge is for the new commission to really go and implement it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, these are obviously worrying signs of falling behind the US on different fronts. Not even talking about China as well. I was actually in China last week and going by train from Shanghai to another medium-sized city of 7 million. 500 kilometers far, but it took less than 2 hours. And the speed of over 300 kilometers per hour was basically normal. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. If I may just add, that's perfectly true, and we have to count on China proceeding very rapidly forward, and staying competitive with China will be a huge challenge. And just one more statistic, just to get the bearing on this. About 40 years ago, Europe was close to 40% of world GDP. It's now below 20%, heading towards 15%. That's the fastest decline of a nation state economically in modern history. The US, interestingly, also challenging. But if you look over the last 30 plus years, the US, with huge fluctuations, has retained a quarter of the world GDP. Right, with China growing and all the other countries growing. So that again gives you the perspective on the resilience and ability of the two different economies, North America and Europe, going in tandem.
Thank you. But let's get maybe more optimistic, looking into Poland. Poland was able to grow, and its small medium enterprises, as the cornerstone of the economy, are very, very flexible, and sometimes we in Czech Republic or Slovakia are a little jealous of this business approach. But Maciej, how do you see the situation? Europe-wide, of course, but specifically Central Europe and Poland maybe in particular.
So just to prove that we haven't been aligning the agenda, I will completely skip the context of the question, and I will not be optimistic. No, but I'm just an engineer, not an economist, so I will not give you statistics. I will just give you the image and the feeling of the entrepreneurial Europe. And entrepreneurial Europe is at the edge, if not behind the edge of catastrophe. I will give a positive message by the end.
I hope so. I hope so.
So when you look on entrepreneurs, means our critical industries are just gone. Means I don't have to explain to Czechs about automotive. Heavy industry, Germany completely. I love my friends, German entrepreneurs, but they are so depressive that I always come with my own bottle of vodka to meet them. But seriously, extremely depressive, heavy loaded with different regulations, extremely expensive energy, completely over-regulated new sector. So when you speak about new technologies, I refuse panels on the development of AI in Europe. I just refuse it because as long as we have PhDs in the national universities about national regulations of the AI, it's not even worthy to discuss it. There will be no European AI. So let's, as we have Microsoft partner of this event, so I can say, as we use the excellent word, we'll continue to use the American AIs in Europe probably, and that's the top we can dream about. So that's the image. The image is we are just doomed. The big advantage is and I would say the positive message comes from this morning's session. We heard a lot of important messages this morning on the 3 opening speeches. One, either we do it together or we continue to be doomed. So the only chance is the consolidation of Europe. What Leta is presenting is his report. Consolidation, leveraging on scale. These messages, I'm coming from telco industry, and he speaks about telco industry. Right. 20 years ago, he would be stoned at every single meeting speaking about consolidation or creating champions or leveraging on scale. So it shows that somehow, in the beginning of my positive message, somehow we are in such a bad situation that the proper reflexes are coming there. So we do speak about first, make it together. Otherwise, again, the scale plays and matters. So we will never step up if we don't do projects at the European scale. Consolidation finally allowed. Well, let's hope that from the Letta report we will have at least, I don't know, 30% done. Already it will be worthy of his monument in Brussels. But seriously, it's revolutionary. It's something you could not present 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, in any of the European capitals, and for sure not in Brussels. We heard a German president of union speaking that union and the energy autonomy will not be growing without renewable and nuclear energy. It's a revolution. It's after Copernicus, probably is the second most important statement in Europe. It's the statement of the German president of Europe promoting nuclear energy. So for me, the state of urgency is so strong, and the situation of the companies is so difficult. I would say difficult. It's so much worse than our competitors in Asia and America, because we still live relatively well. We still have nice drinks and air conditioning working. But I would say this is the last moment where we can change something, so deregulate. I'm not speaking about the fact that our social system are completely bankrupt. We are, at the global level, a social exception, and those systems never got reformed, but they have been at least attempts. So Tusk in Poland 12 years ago, yes, he lost power because of rising the retirement age, but he did it. Macron tried, so it's something, again, something at least you can verbalize, something which would be impossible 10 years ago. So I think those are, my question is, so we have good reflexes. Again, Commission speaking about competitiveness, it's not enough speaking. It means some of my friends, Western friends, are already excited about the word competitiveness being used. It's, if we want to save the economy of Europe, we have to go farther than just the declarations. But again, the sense of urgency, I think, is growing. That the fact that this time we may have, and again, I don't have to convince myself about global warming with the temperature we have outside and inside of this building. But the fact that we make targets and tools, I would say, achievable while keeping the economy running, is something I could pronounce today. I'm testing in Brussels a bad word of saying, oh, what if one of the ambitions of our economy would be a project, it's my personal name, TDI 2050. You know, it's a German brand of cars with the TDI. So keeping some part of the thermal engines to finance the green revolution. 3-5 years ago, I would be stoned. Today, I'm still considered as a kind of tough guy, but it's at least accepted in the language of the corridors of European Commission. So it shows that something is changing. We still have, and I will finish with this positive sign, we still have 500 million consumers, greatly educated people. We still have great industries. We have this green transition which we still could use, even if we are very much late. And somehow also the defense industry, it's something, and again, Letta report speaks about defense. It always was an engine, with all respect, I'm sorry for that, but defense and space always have been the engines of innovation. So it's sad to say, but the fact that we have today to develop the defense industries also gives an opportunity to develop the innovations, which we then hopefully will only use for the civilian purposes. So to sum up, we are at edge, very close to the doom situation. But by the way, the doom situation definition for me, that we will all be only known for museums, tourism, and luxury products, which is not it's not a complete desert. It's but it's only museums. We are very close to it, but the sense of urgency is visible, and what we heard today from Ursula von der Leyen gives me some hope for a kind of change in the real industrial life of Europe.
Thank you, Maciej. So we got the sense of urgency. We got some very good ideas from Letta and from Draghi, etc. So it seems like we know what needs to be done. The question in Europe is always to do it, whether we are able to do it and transform these ideas into real policies and deeds on the ground. But it's clear that none of the progress can happen without innovation and technological progress, because competitiveness is today driven by technological progress and innovation. And I would like to ask Debora, because EIB recently produced a very nice report on the status of innovation in Europe. I think it has very interesting both analysis of the situation, but also ideas what to do next. So maybe if you could give us some highlights. Before you do this, just want to remind everybody, we are using Slido for questions. Some are already coming. We will use them certainly. And also, if you have any questions, please just raise a hand, and I will give you the opportunity to ask the question. But maybe about the innovation and how can we restart innovation in Europe?
I think I would actually answer speaking about several reports that we published recently. One is looking at innovation in Europe overall, and the second one that is dedicated to innovation in Central Eastern Europe, that is actually part of a bigger project that we did together with the Austrian Central Bank and the WIV. In the first one, I think we are looking at innovation at the European level and what are the major challenges that we see. And I think there we convene on several points on what is going wrong in innovation in Europe. And I think the first one is when we look at the global spender in research and development, what you see is that Europe has much less, is present only in some sector, has a certain relevance only in some sectors, machinery and equipment, automotive sector is another sector in which Europe is present, but generally is losing ground. But what is most worrisome for us is that Europe doesn't create a new leader, new companies that enters into the group of the global leader and global spending in R&D. So it's a very static system where the large companies are always the same. They are relatively reluctant to engage in disruptive innovation. And what we also found out is actually that this dominant player, if you want, at the European level, are also not very active in M&A, in acquiring the young innovative companies. So it's a very static system where disruptive innovation is difficult to come. We also were looking at a different group of firms. We basically look at firm in what we call the scale-up phase. So we look at innovative companies and look at how they grow compared to how they would grow in the UK and in the US. And actually what you find out is that Europe has a gap, particularly versus the US, at all stage of growth of firms. But then there is a lot of public support going in, actually supporting also in Europe from the very early stage of growth of the firms up to a certain point. And then you go to what we call the scale-up phase. And those are firms that are ready to enter into experiencing in the market, etc. They are targeting evaluation of 500 million to 10 billion. And there, basically, the support finish completely. The European funds are not big enough to invest in this kind of firms. And the exit for these firms is basically either in the US or through M&A, but M&A with investment from the US, because the European large firms don't look into them. So there is an old system that needs to be addressed. We think that looking at the growth of firms, and particularly looking at this scale-up phase, is something important to look at in terms of innovation, supporting innovation. And I also think that it's very much linked to what Letta mentions. The behavior of the large dominant firms is still not what you would like to see if you want innovation to be entering into the system. Because even the fact that the large dominant players in Europe are not active in M&A of the very innovative firms means they don't go for the very strong transformative change. So this is generally on innovation. On Central Eastern Europe in particular, we have these studies in which we were trying to look at what is happening in the innovation sphere and R&D sphere in Central Eastern Europe. We see a number of positive elements, like on the positive side, the number of R&D workers in R&D that has been doubling in the last decade. The fact that if we look at the firm level, investment in intangible is increasing, was increasing quite fast. The share of the venture capital in Central Eastern Europe and the EU remains small, but increased very much in the last decade. And the fact that if you look at the specialization of Central Eastern Europe is moving toward more value-added sectors. So there is some positive transformation in Central Eastern Europe, but there are a number of challenges that are very strong going forward. On the skill side, I think the fact that aging is coming up, immigration is very much affecting. There is not much focus on long-term training and retraining, and also the graduate, the percentage of graduate is declining over time. So there are a number of factors on the skill side that are a concern for the future. The venture capital market, I was saying, has been increasing, but there is more and more work on a venture capital market, more at the local level rather than an integrated European level. And that's something, again, that I think should be relooked at. And then if I think the capacity, and if you want, this is a challenge and an opportunity. What Beata was saying, the region is very much energy intensive. So maintaining competitiveness with higher energy cost in an energy intensive economy is very complex, very difficult. So the energy transition offers an opportunity of completely transforming, but it's something where the region really needs to invest and transform.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, certainly I agree that we need more disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation requires risk capital, which we don't have in Europe because of the lack of the capital markets. Still 80% of financing is provided by banks, unlike in the US where 80% comes from capital markets, and banks in Europe, as a result of the financial crisis, are overregulated. So it's a kind of vicious circle how to create a sufficient financial source for these innovative capital companies, which of course also carry some level of risk. And the European kind of champions, again, when talking about China, I remember when I was in China back in 2015 as the Minister of Economy, and I met, among other, I met with the chairman of the State Planning Committee. They have the State Planning Committee to plan ahead for at least 5-10 years. And we had a discussion about, of course, also about the automotive sector, because Slovakia being the largest producers of cars per capita in the world. And then he said one interesting thing. He said that we did some analysis about the development of auto industry in the future. We came to the conclusion that as Chinese, we cannot compete with Germans and Europeans in the combustion engines area. So we decided to go into electric mobility. And I told him, well, interesting, but I don't think electric mobility will ever be, kind of prevailing thing. And we will, as Europeans, we will keep our lead in the engines and in mobility area. And he was just smiling. So obviously he knew something that I didn't know at that time. Now with the Chinese electric cars coming to Europe and batteries and so on. So anyway, this long-term planning and also ability to provide risk capital is something that certainly we are missing in Europe. Maybe Beata, one, there is also a question about Letta report and what specifically we should do to catch up with US and China, if you have any ideas on this. But also, I know that EBRD is looking a lot at supply chains, including in terms of the raw materials and how to make European companies more resilient in this area. So maybe also something on that issue.
So perhaps rather than saying what we should do, let me say
Okay.
what we should not do.
Okay.
And that's related
That's
to critical
another
raw
way,
materials,
yes.
right?
Okay.
You all know that green transition requires lots of critical raw materials, graphite for electric cars, rare earth for offshore wind turbines. Now, what graphite and rare earth have in common is that 2/3 of production takes place in China. And graphite was in the news last year because China introduced export restrictions on graphite. Then there were export restrictions on gallium and germanium done in retaliation for the US CHIPS Act that restricted flows of technology to China. Now, is this a worry? Yes, and that's because only about 1/3 of known reserves of graphite are in the Western Bloc. Only about 1/10 of known reserves of rare earth belong to the Western Bloc. So, should tensions with China escalate, it would be very easy for China to retaliate against Europe with export restrictions, because an export restriction can be introduced at the stroke of a pen, while developing new mine takes about 15 years. That's the case from Swedish state-owned company which is developing deposits of rare earth. So I think we should not allow escalation of trade tensions, which can cut us off from critical raw materials, which in turn could slow down green transition.
Thank you. Jan, any reflections on this, especially in terms of innovation and maybe also what specifically and practical should be done by Europeans to catch up?
I think that Debora's points were, very important in the sense that they show how entrenched the leaders can be. That it's very difficult for startups not to get absorbed by the leaders who are in a particular field, in this case, the technological companies. So we heard in one of the other sessions that while Alexa was developed in Poland, it's part of Amazon, right? And so the old technology firms are not likely to be buying up the startups that are really technologically advanced. And so in that sense, the US and China to some extent have, a natural huge advantage. So that's one point. The other one, I would say, Europe probably is dominating the United States in the average quality of education and things around it. But what really matters in the world nowadays is the excellence, the best, right? The US has the best and worst, right? But it has the best, right? In fact, if you look at some of the statistics, and not to take them way too seriously, but with the exit of Britain from the European Union, EU has no university that's ranked in the top 20, right? So again, are you 18, are you 22, it's fine. Central Eastern Europe has no university ranked in the top 200. Again, are you 10 higher or 10 lower, but you're not in the top 100, right? So in some sense, Europe's challenge really is to go for the very top excellence, because the model is that the winner takes all, or almost all nowadays. Being average no longer pays off as much as it used to before. And I think that's where the challenge is. And it's going to be especially important with artificial intelligence, as Marcin mentioned. And I think that when Marcin said about being stoned, he didn't mean drugs.
Thanks, Maciej. You work a lot with the local companies in Poland in particular, but if you were to identify, let's say, 3 top concerns that they have, or why, what are the main impediments to their growth and competitiveness? What do you hear from kind of bottom up?
So first I will try to answer the question.
Okay.
So there are 3 of them. It's energy, energy, and energy.
Okay.
That's very simple. Just to be a bit, because seriously, this one is so big that's the one. Then obviously is labor, but the labor will be obviously somehow declining with the automation. So this somehow at the midterm, labor will be more a question of social services than so human capital will be more a question of what about the retirement system, health system, than about the plants themselves. While the energy, less we have manual labor in Poland, the robots will be cheaper and greener working in Sweden or in France than they are today in Poland. So that's why the energy is really crucial, and that's why again the only solution, because when you look at Poland, I will use Poland. Our current emission is 40% higher in average than in Germany per kilowatt hour, and it's 30 times higher than Sweden and France. 30 times, not 30%. So our largest ambitions for in 15 years, we're supposed to catch up with Germany as of today. So it shows to which extent we are non-competitive with our neighbors. And obviously there will be European competition, so the common energy market in Europe is the only solution. We'll not be able to build nuclear rapidly enough in Poland to catch up on this dimension. So seriously, this is the first priority. Obviously, and if you would ask, in Western Europe will be more about the regulations, because in Poland and Central Europe we have been somehow late on deploying them. So all those, I would take a risk without being stoned or lapidated. It's the crazy directives where the small SME has to report the due audit and report the due diligence reports on the on people providing them packaging paper from Vietnam, if the provider of the coloring of this packaging paper coming from Indonesia was not employing kids. I'm against the labor of kids. But again, we speak about SMEs. So we are somehow late, it's coming, so this will be hitting Central Europe very rapidly. But number one, Western Europe will be regulations. Central Europe is really, and Poland particularly is energy. One point about the questions, raw materials, China, etc. I think, and I have to place this one, a big opportunity for Europe is Ukraine. Means if we speak about the famous strategic autonomy of Europe, the only source of it and only capability to reach it is Ukraine. Yes, there have been a good example of Sweden. Sweden is a funny country with nice people. They have nuclear energy. They have uranium, but they have nuclear energy, and by law they are forbidden to even search for uranium in Sweden because they have nice mountains and they don't want to spoil them. So they prefer somebody in Africa to spoil their own mountains, and the ones in Sweden will remain beautiful. But again, we have to decide about, and Ukraine is a place where a lot of those materials are available, where the labor is still able. Well, it's discutable because with the war, the population and immigration, the population went down. But knowledge, dynamic companies, and unfortunately with the war, the dynamism of those companies, the creativity, IT. When you speak innovation, I would take a bet without having any proofs from international institutions that the most innovative companies in Europe are now in Ukraine. And we just don't know about it because by the way, they deploy it in the area which is not necessarily, hopefully, will not be day-to-day usage in Europe. So we dramatically need to, and it was in the speech of the von der Leyen this morning, we need Ukraine and Europe as much as Ukraine needs Europe helping them. So I think this is one of those positive messages. For sure. We have them at the border. If we integrate them, it's not a one-side advantage to Europe. Which will help Ukraine to be rebuilt. It's a huge potential for development of the strategic independence, also in the area of raw materials, food and agri. So those are the elements where we can gain on this process being accelerated.
Excellent, thank you. We'll have to finish pretty soon, but before we do that, I will give opportunity if anybody wants to ask any question. Otherwise, I will ask question to all panelists, and this is very much linked to one question which came through Slido, which is basically what are the practical steps for the EU to get back on track in terms of competition or competitiveness. So I will ask each of you to name 2 things which you believe are the most important for the EU to get back on track to stay competitive. But before I ask this question, are there any questions from the audience that you would like to ask in addition to those through Slido? Nothing here. Okay, so we can go to the question, two most important things that you believe, if you were advisor to Ursula von der Leyen and European Commission, what would you give us two most important ones?
Two is difficult. I think I
Go
think
for three.
I think I go actually for 3/4, and I think I go back at what I was saying
Yes.
at the beginning. Energy market, having a truly functioning European energy market, and managing the energy transition in Europe. That's number one, fundamental for competitiveness. The ICT innovation side, the integrated financial market, I think it's another fundamental element. And then the last one is something actually we were talking just before on, it's kind of easier to get because it's something really internally European, but is this simplification, a business regulation point of view. It's easier to get because it's internal, but it's very, very difficult to get to the point. I just wanted to mention, we have a survey of European firms that of 12,500 European firms we monitor every year. And we ask something quite trivial, actually, that is whether firms in all sectors, whether they have evidence that their own product has to pass additional regulatory requirement to comply with consumer protection or the bureaucracy for export within the EU. So among EU member states, in theory, if the European single market works, should be 0. 60% of firms are saying they have a huge issue. 60%, it's massive. It's a lot more, a bit more in the service sector, but also in manufacturing. So we still have to look more at the data, but I think this is really the proof that we can do more, just really getting it right on the single market, how it was designed and should have been from the beginning.
Thank you. Time is up, but maybe we just finished these two main things to be done by Commission.
In addition to what Debora said,
yes.
greater focus on supporting young firms rather than small firms, and promoting women in STEM subjects. And that's something this part of the world with communist legacy has comparative advantage in.
Thank you. I fully agree. Jan.
I'll buy into whatever they said, so no repetition. And I think overall just reduce the complexities, reduce this red tape. Exactly. And I think one way to do it is just look at the US and ask yourself, why should we do it in this particular sector this way, same way, same way? There may be a reason why not, but that's a very good way to sort of figure out how to change things.
Thank you. Maciej.
Consolidation, federalization, number one. And the number two is, I don't want to say deregulation, not to sound like the evil of liberalism, but re-regulation. Just put it on the table. We know which burdens are the most stupid, and we even remember when it was voted. So just refix them, re-regulate.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I would like to thank our panelists for, I think, excellent discussion. I hope you enjoyed it and got some ideas what to do with European economy. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of GlobeSec.